Number 5. Rudolph Fentz. Rudolph Fentz, as the story goes, was a man who was found dead in New York in 1951, but seemed as if that wasn't where he was meant to be, and he had got there by accident. Not geographically, like time-wise. Sorry, I'm still trying to work out my time puns, my time jokes. We'll hammer all those out in editing. At 11:15 on June 1951, a man dressed in 19th century attire was seen standing in the middle of the road on a busy New York street. None of the bystanders had seen how he'd arrived there, just that he looked out of sorts, disoriented, and confused. Before anyone could intervene, the man was fatally struck by a taxi. He didn't even have time to yell, "I'm walking here." The story itself could stop here and would be an odd bit of New York history, but it was what was inside the man's pockets that only served to confuse this mystery even more. Let me list it off. On his person, Mr. Fentz had a copper token for a beer worth 5 cents, bearing the name of an unknown saloon that even historians and locals couldn't identify. He had a bill for the care of a horse and the washing of a carriage, coming from a stable that wasn't listed in any address book. He had about $70 worth of vintage American banknotes, a business card with the name Rudolph Fentz, bearing an address on 5th Avenue, and a letter sent to this address, dated 1876 from Philadelphia. And lastly, and maybe most confusingly, a medal for coming third in a 3-legged race. Now, although they had a surprising amount of evidence to identify the man, they couldn't find anything. The captain of the missing persons desk of the NYPD, Hubert Rim, tried everything he could to positively ID this mystery cadaver. Going to the address printed, he found that no one knew who Rudolph Fentz was. Eventually, he found a Rudolph Fentz Jr. in a phone book from 1938, leading the captain to trace Fentz Jr., only to discover that he had passed 5 years earlier, but that his widow had survived him. Interviewing the widow, Captain Rim learned that Fentz's father, one Rudolph Fentz Sr., had gone missing in 1876, aged 29, and had never been found. So what happened? Did Fentz slip through a temporal portal? Was it intentional? Was he abducted by aliens through time and then dropped off at another completely disconnected point in human history? Maybe. I don't know. And my friends, if you want to experience time travel at home, I've actually perfected it. Listen to what you gotta do. First, you need to get comfy. Then you need to get a snack, maybe a drink too, and then you need to click on some top 5 scary videos. Now get really comfy, get the cat, get a blanket. Next thing you know, it's gonna be 8 hours later because you are gonna be watching this stuff all day. Subscribe and tell me if my theory's right. Number 4. The Man from Torrid. Picture a regular day in Tokyo. It's summer, it's hot, it's sticky, it's July, and it's 1954, and a man is trying to enter Tokyo. He isn't particularly suspicious, he's conventional looking and fairly average, but he's denied entrance into Japan and detained by the authorities. His passport looks completely genuine and legitimate, with the exception that his passport lists his country of origin as Torrid, a country no one has ever been to because it doesn't exist. So was he just forging a fake passport? Well, this is where things get a bit interesting. When asked to point out where exactly Torrid was on the map, the man angrily insisted that Torrid is exactly where Andorra is, the small landlocked country between France and Spain. He insisted that he'd never heard of Andorra, don't feel bad if you haven't, and that's where Torrid had been, and had been for the last 1,000 years. Now the Japanese officials detaining him were pretty confused, and they discovered that he had money from several different European countries on his person, and his passport, which other than the fact that it was from a country that doesn't exist, appeared totally genuine, and had been stamped several times already, even by Tokyo. The police were determined to get to the bottom of what it was they were dealing with, as they were more than a bit confused, wondering if they were experiencing the world's most elaborate prank, or perhaps there was something more to the story. They contacted the company he'd worked for, and the company claimed they had never heard of him before, even though the man from Torrid had several pages worth of documents proving his employment. The hotel he had a reservation for? Never heard of him. The company he was meeting in Tokyo? Never heard of him. After a while of investigations that were only turning up more questions than answers, police returned to his hotel room to release him, only to discover that the man had vanished. No one saw him leave the hotel, and there was no way he could have escaped from the window, as the hotel room was nearly on the top floor and there were no balconies. In the years succeeding, there have been all kinds of rumors and speculations as to just what the man from Torrid was. Some have put forward that he could have been a time traveler. It's definitely possible. Another prevailing theory is that he's a man from a different timeline or a different reality altogether, who somehow fell into this one. With this line of thinking, is it unreasonable to consider that the man from Torrid wasn't from this world at all? Could he have been a visitor from another planet? Could Torrid have been the name of his planet? Our visitor's true home? I mean, maybe. Number 3. John Titor. John Titor is the name of a man who claimed he had traveled back in time during the 2000s. Kind of an odd time to travel back in time too, unless maybe you're hatching a complicated scheme to invest in Bitcoin. Anyway, Titor made his post on the Time Travel Institute forum, where he claimed to be a soldier from the far-off year of 2036. So we've got about 12 years to see if any of what he claimed is right, although mild spoiler warning, he's been wrong for most of it. Regardless, let's take a look together. He claims that he had been sent back in time as part of a US government operation to the year 1976, where Mr. Titor was sent back to recover an IBM 5100 computer as it was essential to debugging something in his timeline or something, some time travel stuff. Now, there's a lot more working against Mr. Titor being a time traveler than there is evidence working for him. Foremost, that a lot of his predictions for the future ended up being totally bogus. For one, he claimed there would be a civil war in the United States in the year 2005. This civil war would grow so much into such an unstoppable force that the United States would split up into 5 main regions, and eventually the dissolution of the states would lead into World War III starting in 2015. Now, 2015 is kind of a blur for me. That's when I started college. I don't really remember a lot of it, but I don't remember World War III happening. Although Titor himself posited that because he traveled back in time, he created a new time stream caused by this disruption, and therefore any of his predictions could end up not coming true in this altered state. It kind of sounds like an excuse to me, Mr. Titor, but what do I know? I'm not a time traveler. I can't remember if this follows the rules they set in Avengers Endgame or not. Now, true believers and fair skeptics, is it all possible that the reason Mr. Titor set himself backwards in time because he wasn't just looking for computer parts, but to repair some sort of alien craft? Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not. Is it very fun to speculate on the internet? Absolutely. Number 2. Victor Goddard. Royal Air Force Commander Victor Goddard was an RAF flying ace with a storied career, having flown through missions in both the First and Second World Wars, and also possibly flew through a time vortex once. Don't worry, I'll explain that. In 1935, Goddard was serving during the Second World War, flying a fairly routine mission. He was sent to check out the status of an abandoned Scottish airfield in the unremarkable village of Drem, east of Edinburgh. Sorry, Drem. If we have any Drem viewers, just know that the article I was reading for information called it unremarkable, not me. I would never say that. Goddard flew over the field, and he reported back to HQ that Drem was as unremarkable as they described. I'm so sorry. The airfield was abandoned, desolate, grass overgrown over what remaining buildings still stood, populated mostly by free-spirited cows who were grazing on grass and serving no masters. Circling back around, Goddard found himself caught in a storm that had been passing, causing him to panic for a bit and fight for control of the craft. He circled through, and as he exited the storm, he saw something he could not comprehend. He looked back down and found himself completely frozen in fear. Reporting back once again, he noted that the airfield he'd flown out to was completely restored. There were 4 biplanes in the hangar, and the cows had all been replaced with a staff of mechanics dressed in blue uniforms. The planes on the field were all painted bright yellow, unlike the usual drab silver of the RAF at the time. Goddard was beyond confused. I mean, can you blame him? Had he uncovered a secret base? Was he looking at the enemy? An ally? Was any of this even real? After a few loops around, Goddard found himself caught in the storm yet again, and this time as he exited, he noted that the airfield had returned to its default state, desolated, destroyed, once again populated by cows. The incident shocked Goddard to his core and haunted him. He tried to write about it in a biography about his life called Flight Towards Reality, but he never got any good answers about what he saw. Perhaps most confusingly about the whole ordeal is that what he reported seeing, the blue coveralled mechanics and yellow planes, would end up being the standard service wear for the RAF a few years after the incident in 1939, when the Drem airfield was also reconstructed. Is it possible somehow that Goddard managed to slip forward in time a few years? Was he caught in a vortex? Was the cloud perhaps some sort of unbelievable extraterrestrial technology that he was simply swept up in something larger than himself? Or was the whole experience a product of too much coffee before a mission and not enough sleep? Number 1. Mike Markham. In the best movies, time travel is perfected by one lone scientist working around the clock in a garage tirelessly, perhaps just a little bit off of his rocker. Now, don't think I'm passing judgment at all here. The best leaps in technology have been made by men who were more than a little bit off their rocker. Enter Mike Markham, who in 1995 claims to have cracked the code for time travel with stuff he had lying around the house. He was a 21-year-old electrical engineering major who loved building gizmos at home, but his magnum opus was a device he called the Jacob's Ladder, which was a personal time machine that could send a human being backwards or forwards in time. Now, I can't even begin to parse the explanation for the machine. They didn't hire me for my brain, but if you go hunting after this video, you'll be able to find some detailing how the machine works. But what I can tell you is that it was constructed from a laser from inside a CD player and a continuous arc between 2 poles. Again, I don't know how this works. I'm just reporting the facts. Markham claimed that his device was capable of generating such energy that when he threw a piece of sheet metal into it, it disappeared and reappeared seconds later, which sounds terrifying. I don't know if I want to be on a time machine that's reconstructing me Enterprise transporter style. There are just way too many accidents involved with stuff like that. Unsatisfied with just a piece of sheet metal traveling through the time stream, Markham set out on seeing what would happen if he hooked Jacob's ladder up to a massive power grid and stole 6 transformers from a local station. This experiment would cause a blackout in the neighborhood, leading to Markham's arrest. Now, he would spend a few months in jail, but the incident garnered enough local attention that Markham became a bit of a local hero, and was stunned to discover that after his release, there were offers from aid from pretty much all over, from people offering to donate supplies, money, time, you name it. The people want to time travel. With all the newfound aid, Markham would spend the next 2 years working on the Jacob's Ladder Mark II, having now rebuilt it to accommodate the size of a person. Updates from Markham would end around 1997 though, when he vanished from the public eye and the world at large. He missed a meeting with his parole officer, and when police responded to try and track Markham down, they found the warehouse that he was using as his personal workshop, but they didn't find him there. They just found burnt up machines, damaged electronics, and singed walls. So did Markham's machine work? Well, maybe when he comes back from time, he can tell us. Number 5. Well, first and foremost, if you were looking for any proof that the government definitely knows more about aliens than they let on, how about from the mouth of the 3-letter organizations themselves? The CIA released a tweet in 2014, wow, obviously was meant to be taken in a joking manner, but still pretty illuminating, saying that throughout the 50s and 60s, they estimate that 50% of all sightings of unexplained aerial phenomena and UFOs were simply the CIA testing new aircraft. Out of context, the CIA admits they were behind 50% of all UFO sightings is an extremely attention-grabbing headline, and probably what I should have named this video. Would have got you to click better. And it is an attention-grabbing headline. At the time they were testing the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, codenamed Dragon Lady, which was able to fly at altitudes thought unreachable by a one-manned aircraft at the time. We know the CIA will always be a little bit more technologically advanced than they're willing to let on. That's just the nature of shadowy governments. But the conspiracy theorist in me has to wonder, is it even just the littlest bit possible that them releasing this could be a misinformation campaign? I mean, this is just what they're willing to admit, right? Who's to say what they won't admit? What if they put stuff like this out there so the next time you see something odd in the sky, you just dismiss it thinking, oh, that's just the CIA testing airplanes, instead of the more logical, reasonable answer that it's an alien spacecraft observing you from up above? And what if all I'm saying is just wild speculating and tinfoil hat level conspiracies because I'm trying to get views on video? It's more likely than you think. But them admitting they're responsible for most UFO sightings intones to me that they're aware of a lot more UFO sightings that are reported. Makes you wonder how much they research them all. Do you think they look at every blurry cell phone camera video posted to Reddit, or just the really serious ones that make the news? I'm hoping to get some answers someday, and I have a feeling that some of those answers are in this video. It won't all be wild speculation, I promise. And hey, if you want to see more alien stuff, click through. We've got boxes full of declassified documents, NASA stories, and videos that are just out of this world. Get it? So stay subscribed and stay scared, and I'll see you there. Number 4, the Guy Hoddle memo. So it's a pretty much an open book secret that the 3-letter agencies have known about aliens in some way or another since they've started writing things down. They don't hide it or pretend to hide it anymore, which is nice. They finally admitted that Area 51 even exists for the first time a couple years ago, so we could all use a little openness in our day-to-day. Let's take a look at one of the FBI's most talked about and most viewed documents, the Guy Hoddle memo. And despite being one of the most seen FBI memos, it's but a single-page document that was never followed up on. Well, it sounds like we should follow up on it. Guy Hoddle was the head of the FBI field office in Washington, and his report was addressed to the head of the FBI, one J. Edgar Hoover. The contents of the report were simple, but shocking. It detailed the descriptive encounter of an agent making a physical sighting of what they believed to be a UFO. It's dated 3 years after the Roswell incident, but it was reported in New Mexico for what it's worth. Here's a quote from the memo. The saucers were described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. Now, if you ask me, that is almost too perfect, isn't it? I mean, the memo lines up nearly perfectly with the stereotypical, cartoon description of aliens being little gray or green men flying around in flying saucers around New Mexico. The memo goes on to read that the agent claims they had found the saucers because an FBI high-powered radar in the area had detected it, and this radar detecting it had interfered with the controlling mechanism of the crafts. But despite all of this, which really seems like it's the paper trail screaming, proving, hey, aliens are out there, you should go check them out, the memo ends by saying no further evaluation was attempted, and the Hoddle memo was never followed up on, presumably crumpled up and thrown away. Director Hoover, I guess, thought it wasn't worth his time and disregarded it, leaving it now as nothing more than an incredibly odd piece of history. Number 3, Project Blue Book. Well, here's the thing. Even if Director Hoover at the FBI didn't see fit to look into the Hoddle memo, there were definitely other organizations that were looking into UFOs. Maybe it's not just the FBI, but I can tell you that the Air Force sure was. If you're an experienced UFO enthusiast, perhaps you're already very familiar with Project Blue Book, but if you're not, hey, let's talk about it. The project was officially started in 1952 and terminated in 1969. And the project had two main goals. 1. Confirm if UFOs were a threat to national security. And 2. Scientifically analyze any UFO-related data. Well, that seems like pretty strong evidence to me. Not that the project existed to see if UFOs are real, but rather to determine if they were a threat. That seems like they're writing and admitting like, no, we know, we just want to know if they're scary. And is that not the most human sentiment you've ever heard? If you guys learned nothing from Avatar, we gotta be making friends with aliens, not being afraid of them. In the years of Project Blue Book's operations, a stunning 12,618 reports were filed and collected. And those are just the ones that are officially recorded. Of those, interestingly, there were an individual 700 reports that were found to be unexplainable after research and intense analysis. Isn't that interesting? Now, a great number of these reports turned out to be the U-2 spy plane that we mentioned all the way back in point number 5, if you remember that far away. But that still leaves 700 completely unexplained sightings of aircraft that the USAF looked into and could not find answers for. The project was ultimately shut down in 1969, with the official explanation being given that, number 1, no UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force has ever given any indication of threat to our national security. And number 2, there has been no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represent technological developments or principles beyond the range of present-day scientific knowledge. And number 3, there has been no evidence indicating the sightings categorized as unidentified are extraterrestrial vehicles. Oh, well that sounds like kind of a bit of a bummer, doesn't it? They went through thousands of documents and declared that none of it was worthwhile evidence to suggest that aliens exist. Well, it's a shame that we're never going to mention any more things of the Air Force on this video or any more things about pilots encountering aliens. I mean, that really blows. I mean, except for our next point. Take a listen. Number 2, the UAP report. Very recently, the Pentagon declassified a series of documents known internally as the UAP report, and it was basically the sequel to Project Blue Book, the streaming follow-up. And yeah, every single time we have an alien video, I'm probably going to have a little meltdown where I talk about how last year the government confirmed that they researched UFOs and that's what they spend your money on, and no one seemed to care about this, they just slipped it under the rug. I guess we were kind of busy with other stuff, but still, what happened to our curious minds, people? We learned that the various three-letter agencies in the States had been researching, analyzing, and scouting out sightings of UFOs, mostly because pilots just could not stop reporting them during training ops. One pilot, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that he saw hundreds, maybe thousands in his career as a Navy pilot. One of the more famous ones is the Tic Tac sighting, referring to a massive oval-shaped aircraft that was spotted by 2 pilots. This one comes from 2004, and the 2 veteran pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, were the ones who called it in. 2 respected, trustworthy Navy veterans. Their report reads that the objects were spotted almost out of nowhere, some 80,000 feet in the air, which would then descend rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, then stop at around 2,000 feet and hover in place. Very normal airplane behavior. They would drop out of radar range or shoot directly up into the sky on a 90-degree angle. For weeks, Navy crew was watching these objects trying to determine just what they were. They certainly weren't American in origin, and they weren't recognized by any other organizations. To confirm what they'd seen, Slate and Fravor were sent off on a reconnaissance mission to get eyes on it. What they found was more confusing than either of the 2 men could ever have imagined. They reported back that the object they were seeing was like a giant Tic Tac, white-colored, oval-shaped, and 40 feet long. Far too big to be a drone, and it didn't maneuver in a way like an aircraft would, making erratic movements, staying out of reach of radars, as if it knew it was trying to stay undetected. The pilots flew towards a rendezvous point to touch down and presumably cracked their windows open and asked each other, hey, what the hell was that? But as they flew towards the LZ, the UAP flew past them at a breakneck speed and then disappeared entirely. When questioned about it, Fravor said that it was unlike any aircraft he had ever seen in his life. I mean, that guy flew planes like every day for years, so he probably knows a thing or two. Number 1, non-terrestrial officers. Now, if you're like me, you're probably frustrated that you know the truth is so close within grasp behind closed doors. To know in your heart of hearts that there are answers to the unexplained just out of sight would drive you to do something crazy. Now, for most of us, all we can do is sit and speculate and maybe watch some lovely top 5 videos of a very handsome host talking about aliens. But for one Gary McKinnon, a Scottish computer programmer, he decided that wasn't enough and decided to take matters into his his own hands. McKinnon was a genius computer hacker and had his sights set on the biggest prize he could imagine, going after NASA's servers to see if they had any hidden alien data just waiting to be found, in what was described as the biggest military hack of all time. Quite the conversation starter. Why would anyone risk their career, freedom, and livelihood on this? Well, Gary wanted the truth and he would do anything to get it. McKinnon claims he had insider knowledge that confirmed the US had suppressed anti-gravity technology reverse engineered from UFOs and free energy. In his own statement, McKinnon said, "This should not be kept hidden from the public when pensioners can't even pay their fuel bills." Yeah. Well, so what did McKinnon find? Well, he didn't find proof of the reverse engineered UFOs that he'd been hoping for, but he found quite a lot that was remarkably illuminating. First up, a 400-page document called the Disclosure Project, outlining testimonials from government agents across multiple branches of service, reporting all their sightings and scientific analysis on unexplained flying objects. That would already be pretty impressive, but on top of that, McKinnon also managed to find a document entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers. Non-Terrestrial Officers? What? What? Is that just fancy talk for astronaut? Well, the document was a spreadsheet listing the names of NASA officers and employees who were to be transferred to new ships or to serve on board space stations. But here's where it gets weird. McKinnon noted that the names of these vessels listed did not appear to exist in any other database. And if that wasn't enough, McKinnon claims in his searching he saw images of aircraft that did not resemble anything he had ever seen. One in particular he describes as looking like a massive cigar-shaped craft floating over the northern hemisphere that did not look man-made. One wonders if that's the same as the Tic Tac ship. He said he was in a shock looking at the image and didn't think to take a photo. Now, after pulling off an unbelievable fast one on NASA, McKinnon couldn't resist a bit of cheeky cyber vandalism and edited NASA's website homepage with a bit of text that read, "Your security is crap, by the way." Now, I'm not endorsing hacking a government website, but that's one of the coolest things I've ever read. Now, I don't know how much you know about the United States government. Boy, do they just love it when you prove to them that they have a massive security breach in their most classified data. Presumably the only thing that kept McKinnon from being strapped to a car battery and thrown into a black van by the men in black was the fact that he lived in Scotland and was kind of hard to get a hold of. He was arrested by UK police, and the United States government tried their absolute hardest to have him extradited to the States to be tried for the fullest extent of his crimes. Honestly, I bet it was the note. I bet that's what really pushed them over the edge. McKinnon managed to avoid extradition and was protected by the Crown for serving out what would have been a 70-year sentence. But presumably he's not planning any road trips to the States anytime soon, and I'm sure NASA has improved their security just a little bit. Number 5. The camouflage cloud. Alright, truth seekers, our first clip up today comes to us from Instagram, and I know, but hear me out first before you discredit it and watch this clip and then tell me what you think. User the UFO God, and look, maybe it's just the name, but I'm inclined to trust them, posted this video recently, and it's been illuminating. In the video, we can see something in the clouds moving, or rather, the clouds themselves moving in a way that almost makes it seem alive. If anyone out there seen Jordan Peele's Nope, that's the first thing that I thought to watching this clip, and mostly why I wanted to include it in this video. It brings up an interesting thing to consider. We tend to only think of UFO sightings as little black boxes zipping up through the sky carrying passengers from another world, but what if the UFO sighting was the alien itself? You know what I mean? You follow along? An organic, non-humanoid entity capable of changing shape in ways that our little primitive human brains just couldn't comprehend. Look, I know I'm mostly summarizing the plot of Jordan Peele's brilliant Nope here, but it's an interesting thing to crunch on, and when you're watching this clip, it's hard to think of anything else. I mean, look at the way the cloud moves. It definitely doesn't look like any cloud I've ever seen. And what is there to suggest that extraterrestrial life will fit in neatly into our idea of what they should look like? I mean, we think of flying saucers just because that's what pop culture tells us, but it could be anything, really. There's also the possibility that whatever we're looking at is some incredibly advanced cloaking technology masking a craft. I mean, invisibility cloaking isn't as sci-fi as you think. Prototypes for cloaks are being developed by militaries around the world today. Let me know what you think of this footage down below in the comments, because it had me scratching my head and rubbing my chin, making all kinds of hms and ha's. And if you like what we're doing here and you want to see more UFO content and wild speculation, well, I have got some great news for you, my viewer. I've got loads of UFO videos and I've got tons of vague speculating from yours truly. All you gotta do is hit subscribe. Number 4, Area 51. Our next clip comes to us from Nevada, specifically near Groom Lake. If you're not super familiar with the geography of Nevada, and why would you be unless you're from there, if I told you that Area 51 is located right on top of Groom Lake. Would that catch your attention a little bit? You know, the top secret government black site that technically doesn't exist. The infamous base said to be home to all manner of extraterrestrial activity. That's enough run-up, I think. Let's check out the clip. Now, anything coming out of Area 51 is already pretty suspect. But this is really weird. In the video, we can see a series of flying lights hovering high above the desert dunes. Bright lights in the desert sky is one thing, but in the video we see what looks like them forming together. A series of lights merges together to become one larger one flying around. So what could it possibly be? Drones flying around? Voltron? Now drones seems like it would be the most likely answer if it was anywhere other than Area 51. I'm just saying. Whatever's happening here has to be a top secret. Could this be experiments with technology recovered from beyond the stars? Now there are countless conspiracies surrounding Area 51, but one of the most recurring and popular ones is that it's where UFO technology is stored and reverse engineered to develop new technology and systems for the US military. Perhaps even pilots could be trained to fly alien craft. Whatever's going on here, the likelihood of us ever finding out is next to impossible. If you've seen our video on Area 51 secrets, you know that they keep everything wrapped tight as a knot down there. Nothing they don't want you to see is making it out of that base. That won't stop us from trying to get a good look. Number 3. Bizarre light patterns. Now our next sighting comes to us from the stars themselves, specifically during a live stream of the ISS, the International Space Station for the uninitiated. The stream is simple enough, a live stream view out of a porthole of the space station, offering a round-the-clock look at the stars. It's relaxing and fascinating, and I recommend you check it out. But it's also a window of opportunity into a world of unexplained phenomena. One astute viewer was watching the stream late at night when they saw something incredibly bizarre. Watch the footage, I think you'll know exactly what I mean. We can see a cluster of lights moving bizarrely across the screen in a pattern all in unison together. Now this camera is pointed downwards towards the Earth, so some commenters have suggested that possibly what we could be seeing is intense lights shining up from the Earth herself onto the night sky. And while the realist in me can see where they're coming from here, the paranormal investigator in me is fascinated by the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this is something a little bigger than a weird light pattern. Maybe someone in the comments who knows more about lights and stars can help me out with this, but to me, this cluster of lights moving seems like it's something, man, you know? Could this be another example of extraterrestrial cloaking technology? It's far from the first time astronauts have reported seeing strange things up and around the ISS. I have to imagine the International Space Station is probably a hot spot for extraterrestrial activity. I mean, aliens coming to Earth is one thing, that's on our territory, but our big station up in the stars, that's their neighborhood, that's their backyard we put that up in. I'm sure they want to come out and see what that's all about. I wonder if aliens see it as like a funny little tourist destination to check out, take some photos with, who knows. Number 2, Lieutenant Gorman's UFO dogfight. Now not much happens in North Dakota. Fargo is probably a lot more known as a Coen Brothers movie and a slept-on FX series than it is known as a town where anything of note happens. Unless of course you count the occasional UFO sighting. In October of 1948, Lieutenant George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard would make history and inspire theories for decades when he claims he got into a dogfight with an alien craft. He was flying above the town of Fargo, North Dakota, when he saw what looked like an aircraft about 500 feet below him. He radioed into air traffic to try and ascertain what it was he was looking at, and was shocked to hear back from Mission Control, who told him, well, there shouldn't be any other planes in that area. Naturally, Gorman flew in to investigate. He reported that it was a tiny object, some 6 to 8 inches in diameter, blinding white and completely round, blinking on and off. He says that as he approached this strange bright object, it charged towards him. He pursued it as best he could, but when it looked as if the object was going to crash into him, it shot upwards at a 90-degree angle. He attempted to pursue it, chasing it 14,000 feet into the air, only for it to disappear inexplicably at that mark. Later that night, the air traffic control tower reported seeing that exact same bizarre light at the airfield. Gorman touched down and told his superior officers that he had no idea what it was he encountered, but that he had reason to believe that whatever he was pursuing had thought behind its movements, that it seemed to be making decisions, conscientious choices, and it was reacting to what he was doing. Lieutenant Gorman would live out the rest of his days fairly normally, but no doubt in the back of his mind, he must have always wondered just what it was he encountered that fateful night. Number 1, Tic Tac sighting. If you're a UFO enthusiast, you probably already knew about this, but I'll never stop banging on about this because it's the craziest thing that's happened in years. The Pentagon Pentagon publicly revealed that they've been tracking UFO development for years, putting some serious weight into the UFO discussion. Besides doing more to legitimize UFO discussion than anything else, like ever, it also provided us with a bevy of sightings from government agents to pull from. In 2004, a pair of Navy pilots tracked a series of UFOs for weeks on end. According to their reports, these objects would appear suddenly at about 80,000 feet in the air and then descend rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, eventually stopping at around 20,000 feet and just hovering. They would either drop out of radar range or shoot right back up into the sky, which is pretty bizarre behavior. These entities were monitored for weeks before two fighter jet pilots were officially sent in to investigate the phenomena. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slight, who flew out to try and get eyes on it. What they found would confound the veterans. The men reported back that the object resembled a giant Tic Tac, an unidentifiable white-colored oval-like aircraft about 40 feet long. Far, far too big to be a drone, and doesn't really sound like any aircraft I've ever heard of. The craft was jumping around erratically, staying just out of reach of radars, but not moving in any one particular direction. The pilots agreed on a rendezvous point to touch down and discuss whatever it was they had just seen, but as they were heading towards it, the UFO flew towards their rendezvous point at a breakneck speed before disappearing entirely. Commander David Fravor said it was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and the whole experience had weirded him out. Completely understandable. I think if I ever saw a giant Tic Tac spiraling erratically through the air, it would kind of affect me too. So what do you think? Any ideas at all? Because that sounds like pretty hard proof of a UFO. Number 5. The Roswell autopsy. Perhaps one of the most famous pieces of lost alien footage is the infamous Roswell autopsy tape. Maybe you've heard of it. If you're a UFO enthusiast like me, no doubt it's come up before at some point. Roswell was kind of the birthplace of UFO mania, where a lot of the first conspiracy theories and a lot of the public ideas we have about aliens really stem from. If you don't know somehow, the story goes that an alien craft crash landed in Roswell, New Mexico, where it was swiftly apprehended by shadowy government agents looking to pull a curtain over the whole thing. Reverse engineered, studied, down to the pilot of the craft, recovered by FBI scientists. Almost immediately after, hushed whispers and rumors of a recorded alien autopsy set conspiracists and enthusiasts' mind ablaze in equal measures. Recorded footage of an alien body being dissected would be undeniable proof with world-shattering consequences, and would probably make for some pretty good ratings. Well, the Fox network would agree with you, because in 1995, the footage was broadcasted on Fox, presented by legendary thespian and #1 guy to trust in regards to human-alien relations, one Jonathan Frakes. The film broadcast was not the true footage of the autopsy, but rather a high-budget recreation to show for a wider public audience what had happened. The director claims he had seen the original footage from the 1947 autopsy, but couldn't release it. He claims that he spliced shots from the original footage into the faked footage to provide some clarity, but didn't tell us what was real and what wasn't. And he insists that the video wasn't faked, but rather a reconstruction for educational purposes. Now, despite only being a reenactment, the special effects of the footage are remarkable. It does look pretty believable. It was helmed by industry legend Stan Winston, the special effects warlock responsible for bringing the Predator and the aliens alike. The alien body in the footage was filled with sheep guts, chicken entrails, pig knuckles, and raspberry jam to create the illusion of an alien filled to bursting with foreign organs, and probably tasted halfway decent with a little bit of soy sauce. So was the footage ever actually real, or was it all just cooked up to sweep up viewers on a dwindling TV season? The director maintains always that what he saw was real, he just wasn't allowed to show it, and did his best to show us what happened. There's an interesting discussion to be had there, I think. Was he just showing how easy it is to fraud something, manipulate people into believing whatever they see? Who's to say if the true footage ever did come out, we would even believe it? We would probably just dismiss it the exact same way. But if you want to see way more scary footage, real or not, dismissible or provable, we have got loads and loads of that for you to enjoy. So click through, stay a while, and get scared all night long with Top 5 Scary. I'll be here the whole night and in this building. Number 4. Edgar Mitchell. The thing about most alien sightings is that they don't always come from the most reputable of sources. You know, it's usually a random internet post, maybe a blurry shot from an iPhone kind of thing, posted on Reddit with a caption like, "What is this?" Or, you know, it's somebody who was walking home late at night and saw some lights in the sky and didn't know it was a plane. And while I think we should respect the voice of the people and the common man, it'd be nice if we got someone with a little bit of clout to their name. Well, luckily we've got more than a few astronauts who've seen bizarre things up there and are willing to share their stories. Edgar Mitchell is one such man. He's stood on the face of the moon before, he helped save the Apollo 14 mission from becoming a disaster. He's the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a lifelong defender and believer in aliens and UFOs. Mitchell claims that he's seen things that prove existence of life outside the planet. First and foremost, he is a firm believer of the Roswell conspiracy, and he insists that all those stories are true and that the military has been hiding the truth behind what happened at Roswell for decades, adding on to say that it was buried, and the military propagated a covert movement to discredit everything that had happened at Roswell, to deter people from taking any news about UFOs and flying saucers seriously, dismissing it forever as tinfoil hat stuff. Mitchell claims that NASA believes the public wouldn't be able to handle the truth. Come on, we're ready. We're ready, we're all ready, we're big enough now to know the truth. It's like the tooth fairy, we're grown up, we know where the quarters are coming from, just tell us. And Edgar Mitchell's been trying to just tell us. In 2004, Edgar Mitchell told a Floridan newspaper that he knew there was a secret cabal inside the American government that took in and studied alien corpses, and that after JFK was removed from office, the group did not answer to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. He was quoted saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is where they are coming from." A shadowy organization existing outside the president's control with insider knowledge on aliens and trying to suppress the public. Did Mr. Mitchell just casually confirm the Men in Black are real? Now, NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, but obviously they would. What government is going to throw their hands up and admit that they have been slicing up alien bodies on the side? Number 3, the first flying saucer. Now, while the Roswell, New Mexico incident was the UFO sighting that really shot alien sightings into the mainstream public consciousness and kind of defined what alien sightings look like, you know, the idea of little gray or green men and flying saucers, it was obviously far from the first alien sighting ever recorded, just kind of the most popular. But not even a few weeks earlier, there was actually another famous sighting, and one that's thought to be the progenitor for sightings of UFOs being thought of as flying saucers. Kenneth Arnold was an American aviator. Unlike most UFO sightings, Kenneth never changed his story once, never made any kind of surrealist, outrageous claims, and stuck to the same story for the rest of his life. He saw weird saucers in the air he couldn't explain. Well, let's take a listen. It was 1947, June the 24th, weeks before Roswell, which occurred in July 1947. Mr. Arnold was flying his private plane over Washington by Mount Rainier. I've never been to Washington, so you guys gotta forgive me. He was looking for a recently downed transport plane that had a $5,000 bounty the US military was offering in exchange for its finding. As he was approaching the summit, Arnold noticed that he saw 9 blinding flashes of light hovering up above. When looking in closer, they resembled ships but looked like discs. Arnold said that he saw them flying in a bizarre pattern, with each positioned diagonally together, reporting that it reminded him of the tail of a kite. Arnold was an aviation expert and said that the craft seemed far more advanced than anything human beings were capable of at the time, moving at unbelievable speeds. He landed at a nearby airport and told crew that he saw something bizarre he couldn't rationalize, worried that perhaps it could have been missiles being fired at Washington. Reporters interviewed him and he was pressed for several questions, but no one could corroborate or figure out just exactly what it was he had seen. Arnold was questioned by the Army as well, who took his claims remarkably seriously, as he was a fairly respected and reputable man, and there wasn't really the same culture surrounding aliens and UFOs, and as such, his claim was met with genuine worry. No one ever figured it out, but the story of them being saucers, combined with the saucers seen in New Mexico, led to the public perception of UFOs picturing them as saucers for the better part of 60 years, pretty much to this day. Number 2, the Travis Walton abduction. Now, abduction stories can sometimes be a little much to believe, even for those with the most open minds who want to believe. You know, they all seem kind of the same. It's somebody you maybe can't trust driving home late at night, saw something strange, they woke up in a blinding light room and they got poked and prodded by little gray men. Well, Travis Walton's story is not dissimilar to that. It's pretty out there even by abduction standards, but it's too juicy to pass up, so pop open those ears. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger and was facing a fairly routine day, 6 other loggers and him driving around in the forest, when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed it looked like a flattened disc, a saucer of sorts even. Walton stepped out of the bed of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that knocked him backwards. The rest of the crew panicked and drove away. Huge faux pas, I'll say, leaving your coworker behind after being struck by an alien, but okay, you think you know somebody. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Walton awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because he'd found himself in a blindingly bright room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he knew something was amiss. 3 feet tall, with brown, quarter-sized pupils, with marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, obviously, as one would probably do, and was swiftly restrained by his captors. He tried to fight them off, but was greeted by a tall creature he said resembled a humanoid, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, a kind of Darth Vader looking thing. The masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room and put a translucent mask over his face. And Walton drifted out of consciousness again, unsure if anything was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually finds his way to a phone and called his brother-in-law, who panically asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days, and he was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked out of existence and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was real, a real abduction, and he's maintained that story ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you think this story is fascinating and you're upset that nobody recorded any of it and there wasn't any footage of what Travis described, well, the tragic news is, yeah, it doesn't exist. You can, however, watch a 90s sci-fi movie that is directly based off Travis's case called Fire in the Sky. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's on Amazon Prime or something. It's got Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. He's in it. He's a good actor. Yeah, check it out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The incident and conspiracy at Roswell, New Mexico is one of the most famous events in UFO culture. This incident is considered England's Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Few other alien sightings can boast this many government witnesses, memos, and strange proof. Let's paint the scene. It was December 26, 1980. Oh, nice and festive and Christmas themed. Surrounding Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England was a series of Air Force bases and US Army personnel. 2 of these stationed officers were John Burroughs and Jim Peniston. On this fateful night, the 2 of them were concerned by shining bright lights that were seen flying above the base, worrying that it could perhaps have been a threat or a spy plane scouting out their location. Burroughs said that he thought the lights looked like a beacon summoning people over, and over 40 people on the base all agreed, reporting seeing the lights and sharing their concerns. So the 2 men were sent over to Rendlesham Forest to investigate. In their official document, the 2 men claimed that they had seen a strange, shining, triangular object that was pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men recognized it as an aircraft from any military across the globe. The craft had seemed far too advanced for anything of this world. Black and made out of a smooth, opaque glass. It didn't appear to have any wings or landing gear or even really any methods of propulsion or exhaust. The men describe it as covered in hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the hull of the vessel all over. Neither of the men could identify the glyphs as anything they'd seen before. Duh, it's alien stuff. As the craft touched down, nearby animals were being driven into a frenzy, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning, communications equipment cutting out. The 2 personnel could no longer call back to the base. Now, not even 2 days later, the Rendlesham UFO was spotted again. 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen hovering above the bases surrounding Rendlesham. This time, the crews came significantly more prepared, waiting and ready for the UFO to make contact. The patrol group had found depressions in the ground, and their Geiger counters started blowing up with noise. And the group had known that they'd come across where the UFO had been. And then, right on time, the patrol saw the same craft flying above overhead, disappearing into the night. Years passed, and we're still no closer to understanding just what occurred to those faithful sightings.